And a good Thursday morning, Eagles fans. Another summer morning. But summer is starting to come and go. We're counting down the days until the opening of the Eagles training camp. It's 19 days until I actually report and get some activities in. Yes, that will make it easier for the Mac and Mac guys, John McMullen and Jody McDonald. But we do have a couple of things we can sink our teeth into today here, Johnny Mac. The first of which I just saw as I was prepping for the show. Nice pay raise for Quez Watkins, a guy who I thought was not a lock. He was close to a lock, but not 100% lock to make this football team. And I thought Nick Sirianni, when they were having their spring workouts, not protest too much. His defense of Quez Watkins.
He jumped on the sword for Quez.
Yeah.
What are you talking about? The performance escalator?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's been known for a while. But yeah, he's got, and some people have speculated that he would get cut because of that escalator. But I don't think it's not that, but maybe two. He's under 3 million. He's just under 3 million. He basically under the CBA. Day 3 picks. It might even be third rounders. I forget. I'd have to look.
Third through seventh, yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, third through 7. If they play a certain amount over their first 3 years, they get a bump. And he did the second couple years. So, and but guys playing well, it's not an issue. You're gladly because it's still cheap. It's still very cheap. The problem is, he didn't play that well last season. So now you start talking about, well, whatever the bump was, he was just over 1 million. Now you're almost at 3 million.
Yeah.
Do you want to pay? Do you want to pay that? And maybe it would be a more relevant question if they had other options, but they don't have other options. So from a larger standpoint, 3 million is not that big of a deal for a third wide receiver, but you want more production. It all comes down to production with Quez Watkins. Is he going to be? And I think year 2 Quez Watkins is fine. Year 3 Quez Watkins probably not good enough. And the Eagles are hoping to get closer to year 2, obviously.
And you said it's not that much. And when you talk about the overall salary cap, an increase from 1 million to 2.78 million is not that much. 1.78 million on your overall cap is not going to crush you. But then when you look at it individually for Quez Watkins, he got 178% increase in his salary, and he wasn't all that good. So that's why it does kind of stand out for somebody like me.
Well, and if like I said, if they had better options, it could put him in peril, to be honest. But they don't have better options. So, perhaps Olamide Zaccheaus can take some snaps away if he performs well, but he's pretty much limited to the slot. I don't know how much more he could play outside. So that alone kind of limits him at least a little bit. And then we've been talking about for weeks. I mean, look, number 5 is Britton Covey. And then you're down to the Greg Wards of the world, who great guy, great leader, but he's limited. And some of the undrafted kids, you never know. But they don't have anybody who's going to put Quez Watkins in peril because he got that escalator bump. And then the second part is, he has outperformed his status, his pedigree that we always talk about, originally a 6th-round pick. So, the Eagles are kind of like, well, let's get him back to year 2, hopefully.
Yeah. Here's where either you and I see it differently or me and the Eagles see it differently. The fact that he was drafted in the 6th round, to me, now 3 years in, is irrelevant. I don't care where you drafted him 3 years. The year you draft him, yes. The second year, okay, I could almost see that. Third year, I think you're now stretching it. He's going into his fourth year. Where he was picked, irrelevant. What have you done for me for the first 3 years in the league? That's what I'm judging you off, not where we called your name out on draft day if you've already been in the league for 6 years. So that to me is income.
Yeah, but I'm talking from a salary standpoint. I'm talking as a 6th-round pick. Look, you don't have an issue paying a 3rd-round pick $3 million. It becomes, it gets, it's easy to say that, Jody, but it gets blinded. You don't have like the 3rd, you don't have a problem with a 6th-rounder. You're like, well, we got to pay him $3 million. Well, he's outplayed his standard as at least a 6th-round pick because he played up to your standard? As he played up to the Eagles standard last season? Yeah, probably not. But most 6th-round picks, in fact, Quez is a perfect example of this. I don't know if he's the only guy who got this escalator.
From the Eagles, absolutely.
Yeah, well, for the Eagles. But there aren't a lot of guys around the league. That's what I'm saying, that have gotten this kind of escalator because they don't play that much. Typically. So, I'm just saying from a salary standpoint, it does cloud things at least. Maybe it shouldn't. I'm with you there, but it does. So again, I try to operate in reality. It does cloud things. And, most 6th-round picks aren't getting escalators because they don't play. That's just the reality of the league. It's just the way it is. So that's part of it as well. And the bigger aspect is what I started with. It's not a ton of money, but it is a ton of money if you have other options. But they don't have other options. So that's what it comes down to.
But here's the aspect of it that is going to lock Quez Watkins onto this team. Even if they were to go out and sign a veteran free agent at this stage and bring him in, and he's a guy who's accomplished more than Quez Watkins and would immediately jump above him on the depth chart before the season ever starts, they can't cut Quez now. Part of the escalator is that money is guaranteed. Quez's salary at $1 million, if he had not gotten the escalator, the only thing that would be against the cap as potential dead cap money would be the small percentage, the 1/4 of the signing bonus that he got when he first signed, which isn't a whole hell of a lot for a 6th-round pick. Now this year's $2.78 million, all guaranteed. That's part of the escalator agreement within the CBA. As soon as you get it, every single dollar of that becomes guaranteed. So if they were to cut Quez, they'd still keep the $2.78 million hit on their cap. So it doesn't make any sense to cut him. If you got to pay him anyway and you get no cap relief, why would you go ahead and cut the guy unless he just flat out stinks? And I wouldn't say that about Quez.
And again, we're talking about relatively. Look, if you have to cut a guy at 2.7, you don't want to, but you can. I mean, anybody can do that. But the Eagles don't want to cut him. They don't want to cut him. They do like him more than you and I. They do. That part of it's true. Now, again, I think that would change if they drafted another day 3 pick and he was showing some signs of turning the corner. And they're really light on the depth chart beyond A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. They are not. That is a weakness if one of those guys gets hurt. And luckily that didn't happen for the most part. Devontae was a little banged up late in the season. A.J. was banged up at times, but they played through it. It's a weak spot. It's a stress, but most teams don't have the top of the depth chart that the Eagles do. So that's part of the NFL there are certain positions you can't have great players behind great players. And they're hopeful that he has a bit of a bounce back year. I'll look it up real quick. So if you want to use PFF, he was 52 of 115 in 2021. That's fine. That's like middle of the road. That's fine.
For your third wide receiver, that's not awful. I would have bet he was in, how many did you say? 115?
115.
Yeah, I would have bet he was in the 60s.
Yeah, well, even
70s.
60s that is fine. Last year was 108 of 113. That's not fine. That's the kind of difference. If you get
what was the first number you gave us? 2 years ago?
Yeah, 2 years ago.
Okay. So what was he last year?
108 of 113.
Yeah, that kind of tells the tale, does it not?
Yeah, that's not good enough. He can't play like that. They're hoping he gets back to 2021 when he was middle of the road, and that's acceptable as a third receiver. Last year is not acceptable. And especially when you add on top of it the failure in big spots to make plays that are there. And because remember, in Jody, in theory, he should have gotten better because he's getting less attention.
Right.
With A.J. Brown out there. And it turned out to be worse. So, maybe he's one of those guys that needs a little bit more traffic to get involved in the game. But guess what? You're not getting it here. So, but he's their best option, man. And it's not particularly close, really. It really isn't. And that's an issue.
John, we don't know what any of their undrafted wide receivers are. And I know Quez was drafted and the guys we're talking about weren't drafted. But as you pointed out,
it's always
draft pick is not there isn't a huge difference between being a 6th-round draft pick and an undrafted free agent. I don't know whether any of these kids can play or not because we haven't seen them. You're going to actually get a chance to see him within the next 3 or 4 weeks. And
well, my larger point there, yeah, you can always find Adam Thielen at some point. My larger point is you can't count on that. So if you're going into training camp and saying, well, maybe Joseph Nada, an undrafted kid, maybe everybody got it wrong. Maybe they did. I mean, maybe he turns into a really good player. I'm not saying he can't turn into a really good player. I'm saying the Eagles can't count on that. That can't be a plan. Jaden Hazelwood, that can't be a plan. Quez Watkins, on paper, is by far the third best receiver on this team. And that's not great.
Right.
That's one of the stress points of this roster.
He's here to stay because I did not realize the escalator clause had kicked in, and I absolutely did not know till today that money immediately gets guaranteed. So if you got a player that's kind of sitting on the roster fence, and then you realize, well, we're going to have to cut him for a maybe, and oh, by the way, we don't even get salary cap relief when we cut him. Oh, Quez is going nowhere fast. He is sticking around as their number 3 wide receiver unless someone absolutely floors them. One of their undrafted wide receivers.
And by the way, that's why Nick Sirianni was acting the way he did. He's trying to bolster his confidence as a player. That's what he's trying to do because he knows he's got to count on him. So, there's no – I'm always bemused by fans or people say, oh, yeah, why are you talking like this? What do you want him to bury a guy that he's got to count on? That just doesn't happen in this league. It should happen.
There are some astute Eagle observers, aka John McMullen, Jody McDonald, all your buddies on the beat who go, why did he specifically go to Quez? Nobody asked him about Quez, but he felt the need to
try to
single Quez out.
Confidence is a big thing in this league, man. Big thing.
I understand it is, and we'll have a good guest to talk about that coming up in just a second. A guy who used to be an executive in the league, who we'll see if he believed in the old pat on the back to boost the guy's confidence or not. I'm not sure that should be necessary for a 4th-year player. This is Quez's 4th year coming up. Gotta boost them back up. Okay, we'll see. We got a good guest joining us coming up in just a couple of minutes. Former general manager of the Washington, at the time, Redskins knee football team, knee Commanders, now sports talk show host in Baltimore. Our buddy Vinny Serrato is going to jump aboard with us next here on Birds 365. Stick around.
Do you stream on a Roku?